Welcome back to another edition of Patriot to the Core podcast. I am Thad Forrester, and this is episode number 84. And today I have got former Air Force Combat Controller Zach Asmus and former Marine Cress Clippard with me. Before I get to them, I just want to share that I, like so many other Americans, have been extremely angry the last several weeks over how our leadership has handled this Afghanistan situation. And I don't think many of you really care to hear my opinion, so I'm not going to go into it much. But basically, I have been very distracted. I've been very angry. We lost 13 Americans. More are injured. And I don't see a bit of remorse from President Biden and his team. I don't think they care. There are so many instances, from press conferences where he didn't even mention Afghanistan, to press conferences where Afghanistan was third on his list, to where we all know the situation at Dover where he kept looking at his watch. One time, I can give a guy a pass on that, big deal. But he kept doing it with everybody off the plane. So yeah, as someone whose brother was killed by terrorists in Afghanistan, yeah, I'm angry. And I also know that we left good people over there, Americans, and there are some Afghan allies that are left there as well. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And because how can we trust them? How do we vet them and know that they are good guys? How do we know that they're not still communicating with family members in Afghanistan once they get here, and plotting something? All those things we're going to talk about. I don't think many of my audience knows about the Special Immigrant Visa, the SIV. I didn't. Of course, most of you probably knew more about it than me, but I think it's still going to be very educational. And these two guys on today have been doing this not just for the past month. There's a lot of good things that have happened in the last month. People that have really donated money, planes, time, skills to get in there and to help get people out, to cut through some of the red tape and get some folks out. But Zach and Cress have been doing this for a few years and helping good Afghanis or Iraqis get out and get to the U.S. and get acclimated here and get set up where they can start working and paying back the money that they were basically given to help for their plane tickets and to get them here. So they're going to explain that process, and we're going to talk a little bit about the fiasco in Afghanistan. I had to get their thoughts on some things, and they personally know people that are still there, that were left behind, that are Afghans, but they really have an approach of trying to help people, and they love this country. They serve this country honorably. They know that the Taliban is no good. The same with ISIS-K, all of them. He says there's not much difference between any of them, and they are pure evil. So yeah, they can't be trusted, but there are people there that can be trusted, and some of them were teammates of Zach and Cress's. What's been done is done. The last plane is out of there. The war is over, at least with our government, and I think we're going to talk about the war is not over for the people in Afghanistan still, but in the United States president's eyes, the war is over, and he thinks he's done a great thing, and he thinks he did the way he got everybody out so quick is very noble, and I think that has nothing to do with him. But yeah, the Air Force and the Marines and our military over there did an extraordinary job in some extremely tough circumstances, and they are to be applauded. And those who gave their lives and those who are injured, all of you, I'm so grateful for our military and the selfless service that they provide. I think you'll find this episode very informational, and these are two guys that are taking action. This is what we do now is, well, it's over. We're supposedly vetting all of these Afghans now and sending them here. We're not sending anyone here who's not vetted. Well, I guess we'll see. But I know that the ones that Cress's organization and Zach's organization, I know that what the ones they bring over are fully vetted. So thank you for listening. Let's talk to Zach and Cress. Zach and Cress, thank you for being on Patriot to the Core. I've been pretty fired up, as I'm sure many people have been. Well, I know obviously a lot of Americans have been in Afghanis the last several weeks. So hopefully we can keep our emotions in check today. But before we get into it, Zach and then Cress, will you tell us your background and why you're on here talking about what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, I think you said my name first, so I'll go. I'm Zach Asmus. I was a Air Force Combat Controller, so same job as your brother. And I was in the Air Force from late 2009 through summer of 2015. I did a combat deployment to southern and central and, all parts of Afghanistan. And I think, what probably drew me to this moment is I had an incredible relationship with the interpreter that helped us on every mission that we did there. We had a pretty kinetic deployment, and I came back to the States, wanted to find, a way to help volunteer, to help veterans. And then ultimately I discovered, our interpreters, are not widely regarded and or held in any esteem. And how can I help that community as well? So I think the way I got here was getting involved initially with veterans, which I still try to help out with through a nonprofit here in Houston, but eventually connected with Cress and found real purpose in helping kind of resettle, some of the special immigrant visa applicants that come here. And, if I can find out a way to tap into my professional network to make their lives better once they arrive.
Thank you. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, so I served in the Marine Corps. I was an infantry officer with my first deployment also being to Afghanistan. When I was there, I kind of connected with our little group of interpreters. I was working closely with them and doing some liaison work with the Afghan National Army there. I thought that was rewarding. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I moved down to Houston, and I started working for a veteran organization called the Travis Manion Foundation.
Yep.
And I started the Houston office down here for that, and I got really tied in with this other great group, Combined Arms. And through that, I got networks to all these different veteran organizations, and I realized that, number one, it's really terrific to be a military veteran in the United States, but it's especially good to be a military veteran in Houston, Texas, because we've got so many great organizations, and we're so well organized through the Combined Arms system. There was an event I attended a few years back, and it was for veterans to network with these special immigrant visa holders. I didn't know a whole lot about that program, but I remember I had signed one of these special immigrant visa supervisor letters a long time ago when I was in Afghanistan. And I knew that I had one interpreter buddy that was here in Houston. So I invited him out. We all met up at this Starbucks, and there was a big crowd of his buddies, all combat interpreters, all guys that had served alongside the Marines or the Army in combat for years and years in some of the most dangerous situations, far longer and far more dangerous than what most of us in the service did. And as I was talking to them, I realized they had all the same needs and wants and interests as military veterans. And I was already connected in all these military organizations. And I thought, wow, we don't even really have to make much new if we just kind of invited these guys. These guys know what it means to serve. These guys have served our country and their original country, and now most of them are great American citizens. We should try and incorporate a way for them to take part. So ever since then, a few years ago, I've been involved in a few different organizations that advocate for the special immigrant visa and help take care of them as they come to the United States. Because as Zach said, they don't have a lot of status. They don't have a lot of notoriety like we as veterans do. And so we started the Combined Arms, SIVs, and Allies group. So special immigrant visa holders and all those that were our wartime allies over there, we're here to serve them and really just extend some of the same honors that we do to our fellow veterans to them.
I'd like to even back up a little bit and explain what Combined Arms is, because I think it's important, and it might be important later in the conversation. But when you get out of the military, there are, and this was in 2015, this was the stat, there's 49,000 veteran service organizations that claim to help you with a resume or transitioning into the private sector. So as you can imagine, when you're getting out, you don't know who to trust, who to vet, which one to get involved with. There's no way you could possibly interact with all 49,000 and find the best one. So to highlight that confusion and to parallel it into what happens once you're actually out and you want to do something besides transition, there's all kinds of volunteer organizations. There's the Wounded Warrior Foundation. There's the Mission Continues. There's the Travis Manion Foundation, like Cress mentioned. There's this SIV group. There's all sorts of things that could lead a veteran into all sorts of different directions. Combined Arms brings all those together and even houses them physically in one location. So it reduces overhead. They share a CRM system. It really is kind of like a best of breed, organizational approach that really helps be as efficient as possible and helps people collaborate. And it's like a one-stop shop for veterans. If you want to go to the VA, like sometimes you don't have to go to the VA. The VA comes to Combined Arms, among other things. So as a vet, you go park right out in front of this building and you immediately have access to, Cress, let me know the number of organizations currently inside Combined Arms, but it's at least dozens.
More than 50 now. It's there's some sit in there physically and some have other offices, but they're all through the network. All of their programs, which most organizations have multiple programs with varying eligibility criteria, and they've cataloged it all to match you and your profile with whatever you want and need.
So how long have you been working with, is it CIVs or SIVs? What's the appropriate?
I usually say SIV. I guess you could say either. I mean, CIV kind of sounds like something else. SIV. I mean, Special Immigrant Visa. Either way you say it, the average American has no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So you've got to explain it either way. And so the Special Immigrant Visa is a special program that started in 2009 for our interpreters primarily, and all those that helped us in Iraq and Afghanistan. Because what we found is that these people that were helping us, our allies, started to get targeted, and we needed a way to get them to safety. Yeah, so that's what SIV, Special Immigrant Visa, CIV, whatever you want to call it, I think it's all appropriate. But I've been working with that community here in Houston for about 3 years now.
Yeah, so that's important is we know what's happened here and everybody's gotten involved in the last few weeks with what are we going to do with the good Afghanis and these interpreters and some of the other ones that have helped us and proven or basically been vetted. But you've been doing this since long before the fiasco has happened this past month.
Yeah, and it's been heartbreaking to see this happen so fast. I mean, it's really hurt. We have many Afghan friends here, and every single one of them has family that they're worried about, and it's just been real heartbreaking for the community.
Yeah, and I'd even go back and say that, Cress is claiming 3 years here, but when you take the action to sign a letter of recommendation during service, you are putting your name to a person and saying, like, I vouch for this person to come to the United States. So Cress, served shoulder to shoulder, as did I, but, I didn't have the opportunity to write the letter of recommendation. But, Cress says 3 years, but I mean, I think it honestly goes back to the beginning of your deployment. If you grew a positive relationship with anybody and you left that place better than you found it, and you stood up and vouched for somebody because you believed with the work they did that the United States helped, people here and abroad, then I think you honestly should credit that, volunteerism effort all the way back to then.
For someone like me and many of my listeners that have never been there, never been in your situation, deployed in Afghanistan or Iraq, how do you start trusting these guys who, I mean, we know some have turned. I mean, we know Danny Sanchez, that happened to him, a combat controller. I may have his mom on the show soon. That happens where they do turn, they infiltrate, but how do you learn to trust these guys? Because some of them have proven themselves. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, that was front and center on my deployment. We were very worried about what we called the green on blue threat. So, just in like wargaming or whenever you're drawing a map with the bad guys and the good guys are red and the good guys are blue. But we were saying this green on blue threat. So the green was our allies. And so what happens if the allies get infiltrated, if they get turned somehow? And that was certainly a factor that we planned for. And it was a challenge. My interpreter, my good buddy, who had been with the Marines for years, one day he was in the gym on the base and he got a cell phone call about a bomb, and he started talking about the bomb in the gym, and someone called the called the Marines to come ask him what he was doing. And of course he's talking about a bomb. We're in a war. But that was the challenge. So there were many things that happen during their service. For instance, routine polygraph checks. That was something that all of our interpreters had to do. So, I mean, polygraph, that's pretty intense. They had to go to a lie detector test with our intelligence guys on the base on a regular basis. For the most part, we controlled their phone use and monitored who they were calling and things like that. So they had this tight control. And that was just while they were working with us. But when it came time for them to actually get processed to come to the United States, it became even more intense. So they had a lengthy process where they had to get letters of recommendation from everyone they served with and HR letters from the companies they worked with for 2 years, 2 solid years with no adverse markings on them. They had to prove in writing that they had a credible threat against their lives from the Taliban, from the enemy there. And then after that proved they were eligible. Then they go through this grueling process of background checks from pretty much every intelligence agency that's active in Afghanistan, which is pretty much every intelligence agency. And that's where the system would get backed up a lot. And so after all that, after all those background checks, then they would go to an interview in the embassy and a medical screening and finally come to the United States. And by then, I mean, we've never had any issue with any special immigrant visa recipient being anything related to, the Taliban or any terrorist group in the United States. We've never had an issue with that because it's so rigorous.
Do you know the number on that, Chris?
The number on
SIV recipients who come to America and the
it's something like 20,000, I think, from Afghanistan. And then
they're in the U.S. now?
Yes, that have arrived over the past 10 years or so.
Wow.
I'll expand on that point as well, because I think it's a culture shock no matter how you prepare for it, right? I was in special operations and I did a 2.5-year pipeline and another year, trying to earn my JTAC upgrade in addition to doing other stuff in Southeast Asia at the same time. And you think you're prepared for it, you show up, it doesn't matter, man. It's still a culture shock, and it's still the same question you asked us runs through everybody's head. How do I know who to trust? How much can I tell somebody? How much can I lean on them? Is their information valid? Whatever, right? And that really runs through your head. But I think, and here's the thing, not everyone got a letter of recommendation, right? So you still use your judgment over there, just like you do, in everyday life, talking with people or doing business. And, let's be real, some Terps would be rotated out if they didn't fit. And, some you trusted more than others. And if you were having a super kind of high level mission come down, you would definitely hope that your best interpreters were going on that with you. So, it just became one of those things where you just had to kind of trust your gut. And as crazy as that sounds, that's what happens. And man, those guys have saved my skin so many times. So I know, not just, these aren't just words, right? Like these guys walk the walk kind of after, saying that they would do certain things for us. So it's just like anywhere else, use a judgment call. But I think bottom line is not everyone gets a letter of recommendation. So, when Cress and other officers put their necks out for these guys, it's because they saw the same thing happen on the other side, right? They put their necks out for us for 6-9 months, a year that we saw, and the next group rotates in. So
what kind of money does it take for them to get to the U.S.?
Yeah, that's a big question as well. So, first off, when they do finally get their visa and they are allowed to come here, their flights and by the way, when a special immigrant visa applicant finally gets their visa, they come and they get to bring their spouse and their children as well, or any children under 21. So it's not the whole extended family, but they do get to bring their family. And those flights are purchased with a promissory note, which is like a loan from the International Office of Migration, which is a UN program. And so they come here on that promissory note, and they have to pay that back over time. So initially, when they get here, they have to quickly learn how to become productive members of society. And then as far as resettling them, they get assisted by our country's refugee resettlement agencies, which are nonprofit groups that do use federal funding and give